final video on the judiciary is to do with the independence of the judiciary. So first of all, in an answer, you need to say that independence is guaranteed under Section 3 of the Constitutional Reform Act 2005. So we need to talk about how judges are independent. First of all, judges have tenure. So let's look at superior judges. So the tenure of superior judges. Well, first of all, you can't be dismissed by the government. So the government can't dismiss a judge because they don't like them, because a judge goes against their political beliefs. So they can only be removed by the Queen, and this has to follow a petition from the House of Commons and the House of Lords. So this allows them to make politically unpopular decisions. So, for example, Supreme Court ruled against Boris Johnson when he prorogued Parliament. Inferior judges also have tenure. So this is a second point. The tenure of inferior judges. They have less tenure, so they have less job security. However, it's still very difficult to remove them. So again, they can make politically unpopular decisions. They can only be removed on grounds of incapacity and misbehaviour, and the Lord Chancellor, with the Lord Chief Justice's consent, can dismiss them. Judges are also independent because they have what's called immunity from suit. So immunity from prosecution in criminal cases. You can't prosecute for any acts that they carry out in their judicial function. So, for example, if they wrongly put somebody in prison, as in the case of Syros, then you can't prosecute them for false imprisonment. So this allows them to possibly, make mistakes without being sacked. Immunity from being sued. So in civil cases, you cannot sue a judge for defamation of character, for example. This means that judges can perform duties without fear of repercussions. Now, judges are also independent from the executive. So this is another way that we maintain independence. Superior judges can't be dismissed by the government, by the cabinet. So they cannot be dismissed by the executive, which is stated clearly in the Constitutional Reform Act 2005. Government is not allowed to put any pressure on judges to rule in a certain way. Judges are also independent from the legislature, so you cannot be an MP if you are a full-time judge. Supreme Court judges can't be in the House of Lords, and judges are paid from a fund which is not linked to Parliament. So arguably there is independence. Judges also have to be independent from the case. So there's a very famous case to do with Pinochet, the Chilean dictator. Lord Hoffman, who was a key member of Amnesty International, a human rights group, was sitting on the case to see whether Pinochet could be extradited. And they said that this was not allowed. When they found out that Hoffman was part of this big human rights organisation dealing with a Chilean dictator, they said there was a conflict of interests and he should have let them know. And the case had to actually be reheard. The next way judges are independent is through judicial review. So remember, this is where you challenge the decision of a public body. So as citizens, we have the right to challenge public bodies, to challenge the government, and judges can rule against them. So if you remember the Ann Summers case, where the Department for Work and Pensions banned a job ad because they said it was encouraging sex work, well, there was a judicial review decision of this, substantive judicial review, and they decided that the DWP, Department for Work and Pensions, had acted unlawfully. The other issue is human rights. Judges are independent because they can rule against the government. So you can bring a claim. We are part of the European Convention on Human Rights. You can bring a claim against the government as a citizen of a member state, and then judges can rule against the government. They can say, well, the government has acted unlawfully. The government has breached your human rights. So those are the ways in which, if you had an explain how the judiciary are independent. Those are the things to talk about. Another issue you possibly could get is discuss the importance of an independent judiciary. So some of those examples you could bring in, but you need to make sure you are discussing. So you can talk about the fact that, okay, Parliament can still interfere. It can change the pension and retirement age. Why is it important? Well, that judges are independent. So it's vital to have independence in a democracy. Otherwise, a government could sack, they could promote judges who support their views or disagreed with them. It protects us so much from abuses of power. It ensures the rule of law is upheld. Nobody is above the law. So when they prorogued Parliament, they were told off about that because you can't just stop democracy in its tracks. Judges are impartial, so this is very important because they decide the case on the evidence in court, so they are free to make unpopular decisions to ensure justice is achieved. Judicial independence is also incredibly important because they act as a checking body. They follow the doctrine of separation of powers, so they can, as we said, rule against the government. And Montesquieu said all three arms of the state must be separate. The fact that they have immunity is good because they can carry out their role without fear of being sacked. They have tenure. They can be politically unpopular. They're completely independent. There are issues, though, as we said in one of the previous videos, about the fact that they you have got an overlap because the cabinet, so the executive, the people who propose the law, are part of the legislature because they are part of the House of Commons. So judicial independence is incredibly important to achieve justice, the rule of law, but you have to think, is it satisfactory? Has independence been achieved?